Sagittarius, God will remove someone from your life for a reason you won't believe. And one day, you'll understand why. Have you ever had someone suddenly walk out of your life without any explanation? And then, months or even years later, you realized it was one of the greatest blessings God ever gave you? Maybe at the time, it didn't feel like a blessing. Maybe all you felt was heartbreak, confusion, and an aching silence filled with unanswered questions. But what if I told you that moment of separation wasn't random? That it wasn't rejection, but divine redirection? If you're a Sagittarius, this message may be reaching you right at the moment when your heart begins to question something, or someone. A relationship that once made you feel at peace now feels unfamiliar. Conversations that used to flow now feel forced. Something small and silent is shifting, you can't name it, but you can feel it. And that feeling is real. You are being moved. Not by your feet, but by your soul. This is a transition on a higher level. A divine intervention, quiet, but precise. Over the next 30 minutes, I will walk you through one of the most profound journeys a Sagittarius can face. When God pulls you away from someone, not to punish you, but to protect you from something you haven't yet seen. And yes, one day, you will understand why. Not today, perhaps, but soon. And when that day comes, you will look back and say, "Thank you, God, for taking me down that road." But right now, if you don't understand, that's okay. What matters is, you're still here. And what's coming next is about to change everything. Because what you're experiencing is not an accident. It's a calling. A divine rearrangement. And in the stillness of your heart, beneath all the confusion, God is whispering, "I'm making room." So I invite you to whisper this back as a sacred commitment to the universe. Or write it down in the comments if you feel moved to do so. I am ready for God to remove from my life what no longer belongs to me. Don't underestimate the power of that declaration. It's not just a sentence. It's a wave of energy. A signal sent to heaven that says, you're ready for the new chapter that's about to begin. If you're feeling a connection slowly fade, grow distant, and you don't know why, this might be the confirmation you've been waiting for. Like the last puzzle piece finally falling into place after months of quiet waiting. If what I'm saying resonates with you, hit like, share this video. Because you might be the bridge that helps someone else who's going through a separation they can't name. Feel a little less alone. This message won't end in fear or regret. It will end in understanding. In peace. In a quiet knowing that God never left your side, not even for a second. So stay with me, Sagittarius. Because this may be the moment you begin to see everything in a completely different light. Some people enter our lives like miracles, and some leave us like unanswered questions. We spend years searching for the reasons, while God already knew the ending from the very beginning. But God doesn't speak. He doesn't explain. Because if he did, we'd never learn anything from the silence itself. I used to think that those who left me did so because they changed. But now I know, maybe they didn't change. Maybe I grew. And they could no longer walk beside me. Just like a tree must let go of its withered leaves to receive better sunlight. Some relationships are like autumn, beautiful, vibrant, but destined to fall so that new life can begin. Sagittarius is born to go far. Not just in distance, but in depth. We are seekers. We cannot stay in old places just because they once felt safe. God did not create a Sagittarius to remain still inside comfort zones. He placed in your heart a fire, and when that fire begins to dim because of someone else, God will intervene. Not with thunder, but with a silence that keeps you up at night. A distance you don't understand. A stillness between two hearts no one can explain. Once, I asked God, why did you take them away from me? and I heard nothing. But months later, when I learned to stand alone, when I found my true voice, the one I had lost trying to keep everything peaceful, I realized, God didn't take anything from me. He was bringing me back to myself. That is the lesson I want to leave with you today. Sometimes, loss is not the end. Sometimes, it's the return. The return of your freedom, your clarity, your wholeness, things you never could have reached if you had kept clinging to what had already expired in your life. And you know what? Not everyone has the courage to see that. Some people stay in relationships that have long gone cold because they're afraid of starting over. Some settle for smallness because they're afraid to walk into the light. But not you. Not Sagittarius. You were born to grow through every goodbye. You didn't come to this world to hold on to everything. You came to remember what's truly yours, and to bravely let go of anything that no longer reflects your light. If you're hearing this and someone specific comes to mind, I invite you to be honest with yourself. You don't have to act right away, and there's no need to rush into a decision. Just sit quietly and ask yourself, does this connection still nourish my soul? If the answer makes your heart sink, then you already know, and if this message makes you feel less alone, I invite you to leave a comment. I'm learning to let go so I can heal. You might be the strength someone else needs to see themselves in your story. And don't forget to share this video if you know someone struggling with a separation they can't explain. You might be the sign they've been silently praying for. I used to think that forgiveness was about letting the other person off the hook. But now I know, forgiveness is about setting myself free so I can move forward. And sometimes, forgiveness isn't just for their mistakes, it's for the expectations I had placed on them. I once believed they'd stay forever. I believed they would fully understand me. But no one can do that, except God. Only He truly knows you, to the depths of your soul. Everyone else, they're just fellow travelers walking a stretch of the road with you. So when someone walks out of your life, instead of asking, why, learn to say, I believe this part of the journey is complete. That is maturity. That is faith, and it is one of the deepest forms of humility, to trust God's direction, even without having all the answers. When I look back on my life, the moments I'm most grateful for aren't the beautiful relationships that lasted. It's the ones that ended at the right time. They taught me strength. They taught me how to live honestly. They showed me I didn't need someone to feel whole. And oddly enough, when I stopped holding on to anyone, the people truly meant for me began to appear, quietly, without pressure. They came as the answer to prayers I had forgotten I even whispered. Sagittarius, you are not someone who breaks easily. You are the sign of light, of expansion, of journeys that have no name, but only the soul can understand. And maybe this current separation is not a punishment. Maybe it's a sacred doorway. One you are meant to walk through to meet yourself again, not in pain, but in peace. In the next section, I'll talk to you about 3 very clear signs that God often uses to let you know this connection has served its purpose. It's not a bad omen. It's a wake-up call. And when you learn to recognize them, you'll stop clinging to what's dissolving, because you'll realize what's coming next is the miracle you once prayed for. One time, I heard an old pastor say, in a quiet voice, God never takes something from you without preparing something better to replace it. When I first heard that, I nodded, but deep down, I didn't believe it. Because at the time, I was in the middle of heartbreak. How could I believe in a brighter future when the present was full of tears? How could I see anything good when the person I loved most was slowly slipping away like sand through my fingers, no matter how tightly I held on? But as time passed, the empty space they left behind was slowly filled, not by someone new, but by light, the light of understanding, the light of healing, the light of a new kind of faith, that everything happens for a reason, even if we can only see that reason once we're at peace. Today, I want to share with you 3 sacred signs I've learned on my journey. 3 ways God lets you know that a relationship, no matter how beautiful it once was, has fulfilled its divine purpose in your life, and that it's time to move forward. Sign number 1. You are no longer yourself when you're with them. I'm not talking about the usual compromises that come with any relationship. I'm talking about those moments when you silence your real laughter, when you speak less to avoid conflict, when you hide your hurt just to keep the peace. If you find yourself constantly stepping back so they can step forward, that's no longer companionship, that's contraction. And a soul like Sagittarius, born to expand, explore, and rise, can never feel whole when being held back. My personal belief is this: any connection that makes you lose your sense of self isn't love, it's attachment. And attachment, no matter how sweet, can still be a cage. God didn't make you to live in a cage. He made you to fly. And if someone, even unintentionally, makes you forget your wings, then maybe it's time to remember who you really are. Sign number 2. Their presence drains you instead of reviving you. I know this might sound harsh, but listen to your body. There are people whose very presence brings relief. And there are people who, after every conversation, leave you feeling like you've lost part of your life force. Some lift you, some understand you, some make you feel safe, and some keep you on guard, constantly explaining, constantly questioning yourself. I was once in a relationship where every time I walked away from a conversation, I didn't feel more connected, I felt empty. Diminished, not because the other person was cruel, but because our energies no longer aligned. As your soul grows, frequencies that no longer align will begin to create friction naturally. And sometimes, the only way to truly heal is to walk away. Emotional impact statement. You don't have to exhaust yourself to prove you are worthy of love. If this speaks to you, pause for a moment and be honest with yourself. Is this relationship helping me grow, or is it draining me? And if you feel yourself in these words, I invite you to write this in the comments. I'm ready to let go so I can find myself again. Not because you're ungrateful, but because you are growing. And finally, sign number 3. Something new is knocking, but it can't enter because you haven't made space yet. One of the hardest things to accept is this. You might be holding on to someone not because they still belong, but because you're afraid of the emptiness. But I've learned that God cannot pour new wine into old wineskins. He cannot bring a new miracle into a space where the energy is worn out, stagnant. God wants to bring you something new, a healing relationship, a sacred partnership, an understanding that needs no translation. But you have to let go of the old so that your hands are open wide enough to receive what's coming. I know, for many, letting go of someone familiar feels like a silent funeral. But you haven't lost anyone. You're simply making room for the right person to step in at the right time. And if you believe your soul is worthy of love without sacrificing its freedom, then you'll understand. Separation is not a failure. It is heaven's way of saying, I'm taking you somewhere greater. Think about this. If you never let go, you'll never discover what's waiting on the other side of the next door. And maybe, just maybe, that door opens into a space where you are loved exactly as you are. Without having to try, without having to change. Maybe that's where you truly belong. Transition to next section. In the next part, I'll take you deeper into the language of the soul, the spiritual signals in your body and mind that let you know when God is speaking, it's time. Because when He begins to speak, everything inside you will feel it, even if your mind doesn't understand it yet. And that is how you'll know something is being removed, so something sacred can begin. Some changes don't come from the outside. They start quietly within. Not through chaos. Not through a dramatic moment. But through a silent shift in the soul. Like a compass needle slowly turning. And you don't know why, but you know something is changing. Deep inside, you begin to feel disconnected. Not because you're selfish, but because you're awakening. And that is when God starts to speak. Not through words, but through frequency, through feeling, through an inner movement you cannot ignore. You may not know what to do yet, but you know you can't keep living the way you were. That is spiritual awakening. That is the first sign. No one else can see it, but you feel it clearly. I remember one morning, I woke up and no longer felt aligned with the life I was living. Everything around me was the same, my job, my relationships, the daily conversations. But something inside had changed. I no longer felt excited by what once thrilled me. I didn't feel like myself in the spaces that used to feel safe. And I knew God was calling me. Not outward, but inward. The miracle was, I didn't know where He was leading me, but I knew I couldn't stay. Have you ever felt that? That something once so familiar, now quietly exhausts you. That a relationship that once made you feel loved, now makes you feel small. Don't be too quick to blame the other person. Don't blame yourself either. Maybe you're changing. You're growing. And what once fit you perfectly, no longer fits the soul you've become. Personal perspective. I once tried to keep everything intact, only to realize that I was the one slowly fading. I tried to keep them. Tried to keep the image of us. Tried to keep things as they were, until one day, God asked me, do you choose them, or do you choose yourself? And for the first time, I chose me. Spiritual awakening is never loud. It comes in the small moments. When you notice you're forcing something. When you hear their voice and your heart no longer stirs. When every meeting leaves you more tired than fulfilled. It's not that you've stopped loving. It's that your soul is reclaiming its truth. And you can no longer pretend. Emotional impact statement. There is no pain like having to pretend you're okay in a relationship that no longer feeds your soul. And this is the lesson I want to leave with you today. When a connection wounds you more than it heals you, it's no longer love. No matter what you call it. True love, the kind that comes from God, always brings life. Even when it challenges you, it still carries light. It never makes you feel small or lost in the heart of the one you care for. Sometimes, letting go will feel unbearably lonely. But you know what? Being alone in truth is still better than living in false happiness inside a love that's no longer real. In that emptiness, God will begin to fill you with things you never imagined: peace, clarity, and a new kind of strength. If you're experiencing these signs, I encourage you to listen to your body and your intuition. If you find yourself speaking less, laughing less, or feeling less like yourself whenever you're around them, be honest. And if you're in that silence right now, I invite you to write this affirmation. I'm listening to the voice of God within me. Because writing it down is the first step to claiming that you're not crazy. You're not overly sensitive, you're simply beginning to see more clearly. Emotional reflection. Have you ever felt like your soul was trying to escape something, even while your mind wasn't ready to let go? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because you never know, your honest story might be what saves someone else who's caught in the same confusion. We're not just here to learn our own lessons. We're here to light the way for each other. There's one truth I've come to understand through it all. When God begins to pull someone out of your life, don't hold on. Because you don't know what He's protecting you from. That person may have been a lesson. A beautiful memory. But not everyone who once made you happy is meant to walk with you forever. Some people are only meant to be in the early chapters, to teach you something. To lift you for a season. And then move on. That's not failure. That's completion. And maybe what you need most right now is not to rescue a connection, but to accept with courage that your time with that person is done. Life lesson. An ending isn't always something bad. Sometimes, it's the end of anxiety. The end of trying too hard. The end of losing yourself just to hold on to something that's no longer a blessing. And then, you'll walk away from that chapter lighter. Stronger. Whole again. Not because you forgot them, but because you finally remembered yourself. In the next part, I'll tell you about the sacred gifts that only appear after you've dared to let go. The doors that only open once you walk away from what once was everything. Because sometimes, the miracle doesn't come when something returns. The miracle comes when you no longer need it to. There's something I realized quite late, but once I saw it, it changed the way I looked at loss. God doesn't just take away. He replaces. But that only happens after you let go of the old. After you stop trying to open a door he's already closed. After you've stood in the stillness long enough, not rushing to fill the space, so that real light has the chance to pour in. When I walked away from the relationship that once felt like the center of my world, I thought I had entered a winter without end. Every day felt like a morning without laughter. Every night without someone to share the little stories. I didn't know where I was going. I had no plan. No map. But I had one thing: faith. Faith that if I dared to walk away from what had lost its life, God would not leave me wandering in the desert forever. And then, without noise, without spectacle, the miracles began to appear. Not as thunderclaps, but as small moments. A morning where I woke up and felt calm. An afternoon where I laughed, truly, for the first time in months. A message from an old friend, reminding me that I wasn't alone. None of those things could have happened if I had stayed in the old connection. If I had remained in a place from which God had already withdrawn his light. I used to think letting go was the end. But it's not. It's the beginning of something cleaner, truer, more sacred. Something that God could never hand you while your hands were still clinging to what had already run dry. We often think miracles arrive with a bang. But no. Miracles cannot come if you haven't made space for them. A heart full of regret cannot hold peace. A soul clinging to broken connections cannot receive the fullness of the love God has prepared. And do you know what? Sacred gifts aren't like earthly ones. They don't come wrapped in ribbon. They don't always sparkle right away. They arrive quietly. Like gratitude no one else sees. Like a new kind of strength when you finally realize, you're no longer afraid of being alone. You're no longer afraid of silence. And in that moment, God will begin to send you what's truly meant for you, a person. An opportunity. An awakening that you couldn't have received while patching up what was never meant to last. You cannot receive the sacred if you're still clinging to the merely enough. And sometimes, the real pain doesn't come from someone leaving. It comes from you not allowing yourself to receive something better. And one day, you'll look back and say, now I understand why they had to go. Not because they were bad. Not because you were wrong. But because the journey was complete. Every soul has a moment where the paths must part. And you'll thank God, not just for bringing in the new, but for taking away the old, at exactly the right time. Final emotional point. The most sacred thing isn't keeping the one you love. It's keeping your light, even after they've gone. If what I've shared today has touched your heart, I invite you to write a line from your soul. Leave it in the comments as a declaration to heaven. I am ready to make space for the sacred thing God has prepared. This is not just an action. It's a commitment. An invitation to the miracle. And if you know someone going through a difficult goodbye, send this to them. Because you never know, one sentence here might be exactly what they needed to hold onto their faith. If your heart is quiet but your soul is screaming that something has come to its end, be brave enough to write it down. Share it. Because sharing isn't just speaking the pain. It's how you begin to carve a path for healing. You know, what makes me cherish letting go isn't just what I received afterward, though yes, I did receive something greater. It's that I met myself again. I found my own gaze in the mirror. Not blurred by someone else, but glowing, because peace had returned. And you will meet yourself again at the end of this journey. In the next part, I'll talk with you about how to protect your heart after letting go. How not to fall into the spiral of going back. Not to be trapped in regret. Not to seek validation from someone who no longer walks with you. Because after you let go, what you need most is not their answers, but the steadiness of your own heart. Letting go of someone is never easy. But once you've let go, learning not to go back is even harder. There will be nights you still remember. Moments when your heart softens. And part of you still hopes. Not hoping they'll change, but hoping that maybe this time will be different. That if you give it just one more chance, if you're more patient, if you explain more clearly, maybe you can hold on to what once meant everything. I understand that feeling. I've walked away and come back. Not just once. I used to believe that true love never disappears. That if something went wrong, it was because I wasn't good enough, didn't love deeply enough, didn't understand enough. But then I realized, some things are not meant to be held. Some people are sent by God not to stay, but to awaken a part of me I had forgotten. True love does not ask you to sacrifice your peace. It does not require you to give up your self-worth. It doesn't ask you to shrink your heart every time you want to speak honestly. If a love wounds you more than it heals you, and you keep walking away and returning, clinging to a fading hope, that's not love. That's dependency dressed in sweetness. And God wants you free from it. There's a stage in letting go that few talk about, it's the emptiness. You've walked away from the relationship. The pain isn't sharp anymore. But the future still isn't clear. As if you're between two worlds, you're no longer who you were. But you're not yet who you're becoming. And in that space, many return. Not because they still love the person, but because they fear who they are without that role. I've gone back, not because I still loved them, but because I wasn't used to the silence. The kind of silence that made me feel like I was slowly disappearing. I wasn't used to being independent. I wasn't strong enough yet to believe I deserved something different. But every time I went back, I felt myself drift further from who I was meant to be. Each time I tried to fix something already broken, I lost a little more of the part of me that once believed in light, in freedom, in love that doesn't require begging. The truth is, if you've been brave enough to let something go, then you're brave enough not to go back. Not out of coldness, but out of faith. Faith that what is truly from God won't ask you to hurt yourself to keep it. What is right will arrive the right way. And what needs to leave, no matter how tightly you hold on, it will slip through your fingers like sand. If you're in that in-between space, between letting go and starting over, I just want you to know, you are not alone. I've been there. Many of us have. And it is there, in that space, that you meet yourself again. No longer waiting on someone else's approval to feel worthy. You begin to hear your own voice again. To remember what brings you joy. To rediscover your own light, not the light reflected off someone else, but the light that comes from deep within you. Take time for yourself. Care for your healing heart as if you're caring for a child recovering from a long illness. Gently. No pressure. No rush to be happy again. Let your heart know that you will not abandon it anymore. That from now on, you are its protector. No one else. There will be days when you feel weak. Days when you want to text, to call, to go back. But remember, you've come too far to return to a place you no longer belong. Write down a sacred reminder from your own soul. I will not return to where God has already called me to leave. Let that sentence be the thread that ties you to the future, not the past. And if you can, share your heart right now. Not just to release it, but to connect. So that others, those quietly walking the same road, will know they are not alone. They'll know someone else is learning to love themselves again. And that real love, love from God, will never make you feel like a burden. I believe this with all my heart. God didn't call you out of something just to leave you stuck in the in-between. He's calling you to something new. A new version of you. A freer life. And He will not let you walk alone. Maybe right now the path isn't clear. But every step you take in faith, that's how you begin to write the path itself. And that's the difference. Love from God doesn't just connect two hearts, it connects three. You, your partner, and God Himself. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. This kind of love doesn't just bring emotion, it brings purpose. A shared mission, a sacred journey where both partners not only love each other, but help one another walk closer to the will of heaven. If you're longing for a love like that, I want you to know, you don't have to go searching. Just live in your light. When the time is right, God will send that person. Not early, not late, but right on time. And if you've experienced loves that didn't look like that, don't blame yourself. Don't resent the other person. They were allowed by God to enter your life to clarify your boundaries. To help you learn the difference between real love and attachment. Between passion and peace. Between someone you try to hold on to. And someone your soul can truly rest with. Write down this prayer for the love you are opening up to. I open my heart to a love from God. Where I don't have to dim my light to stay. Let the universe hear you. Let God see that you're ready. And if you know someone who's walking through the emptiness of letting go, share this part with them. Because maybe they're believing they don't deserve to love again. When in truth, they're just waiting for a better love. You weren't created to stay in relationships that make you forget who you are. You were created to love and be loved in a sacred way. A way that doesn't deplete you. A way that allows you to bloom in both your softness and your strength. In the next part, I'll talk to you about something rarely discussed. How to keep your heart open after heartbreak. How not to let old wounds keep you from the new love God is leading you toward. After you've let go, after you didn't go back. After you learned the lessons, sat through the emptiness, and began again alone, something quiet begins to happen, your heart closes. Not because you want it to, but because part of you has learned to protect itself by shutting down. You no longer believe like before. You're not as easily moved, not as quick to hope. You smile, you live, you feel at peace, but deep down, there's a door that's been closed, the place that once held love. And you whisper to yourself, let's just leave it that way. Quiet, peaceful, no more love, it's fine. I know that feeling. I used to feel proud that I no longer longed for anyone. I thought I was strong because I didn't crave connection anymore. But then one day, someone showed up, with gentle sincerity, with unforced kindness. With words that softly reached the corners of me I thought had gone numb, and I realized, I didn't know how to open my heart anymore. I had let past pain guard the door. And that wasn't healing. That was survival, but it wasn't how I was born to live. God didn't create you to be just okay. He created you to live fully. Not just to exist, but to shine. To be loved. And to love again in light, not fear. In faith, not doubt. Not with a patched up heart, but with a soul full of light. I'm not saying you have to open your heart tomorrow. I'm not saying you have to fall in love quickly. But I believe this, you cannot let the past write the rest of the story you're meant to live. You deserve a new love, not a repeat. Not a substitute, but something truly designed for the version of you today. The version that has grown. That has learned to stand alone. But also learn to accept. Being alone isn't your final destination. Being alone is just the space where you learn what's truly worthy to step in. If you're afraid you'll be hurt again, I get it. That fear is real. You once gave everything. You once believed, and someone didn't keep their part of the promise. But remember this. The one who hurt you has no power to define the love that's still ahead of you. They don't get to write the next chapter of the story God is still unfolding. And you don't get to close the book before the miracle arrives. You can start with small things. Looking someone in the eye without looking away. Answering a message without defensiveness. Allowing yourself to believe in kindness, even when it comes from a stranger. Not because you need someone to complete you, but because you're finally living openly, truthfully, softly again. And only in that softness can sacred love find you. I once feared that loving again would cost me the peace I fought so hard to earn. But I was wrong. Love from God doesn't take your peace, it deepens it. It doesn't bring chaos. It doesn't make you anxious. It doesn't demand tests, guessing, or proving anything. It simply exists, gently, clearly, as an extension of the light already within you. If you find yourself living, okay, but not really touching the fullness of love, I invite you to whisper this as an opening prayer. I'm ready to open my heart to something better than what I lost. No need to shout, just be honest. And if you've survived losses you thought you'd never get through, then you are strong enough to open your heart again. Not to repeat, but to begin, not for someone to fill you, but for you both to build something new. On ground that's finally solid. If you're hearing this and feel your heart stir, know this, it's not an accident. Maybe God is knocking. Not loud, not forceful, just asking, are you ready to be loved in a healthy way? And if you say yes, He won't let you walk this journey alone. In the next section, I'll share one of the gentlest truths in God's design. When He closes a door and teaches you to stand on your own, He's not leaving you there. He's preparing you for a relationship where you won't have to choose between love and peace, because this time, you'll have both. You've come with me this far. And if you have, I believe it's not just because you're curious, but because something inside you has been touched. Maybe you've just come out of a breakup. Maybe you're still in the silence, where no one truly understands what you're feeling. Or maybe you've found peace again, but still haven't dared to believe in something better. Wherever you are, I want you to know this: God never abandons your story. What He allows to fall away isn't loss, it's clearing space. And the empty places He leaves are always invitations to open your heart to something more sacred, more gentle, more aligned. You don't need to know what tomorrow looks like. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to be strong all the time. You just need to breathe and let your heart soften. You just need to keep your heart tender, so that when someone comes, someone who makes you brighter, not smaller, someone who calms your doubts, not fuels them, you'll recognize, this is not a replacement. This is what was promised. The love you're waiting for isn't a perfect person. It's someone aligned with your sacred path. They're not coming to complete you, but to build something holy with you. A love born from maturity, healing, and the leading of the Holy Spirit. And if you've been afraid you might never love again, remember. God didn't place love in your heart so you could live your whole life untouched by it. If He allowed something to end, He also has the power to begin something new, not immediately, but right on time. So before we close this journey, I'll ask you just one thing: are you ready to open your heart to the sacred thing God is preparing? If the answer is yes, write that in the comments. As confirmation, as a step of faith. As a way of saying, you're moving forward, not in fear, but in hope. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being brave enough to face this, to let go, to heal. And if you can believe in anything today, I hope you'll believe this: love from God is never late. It only arrives when your heart is healed enough to receive it.